Coming up, flash flooding poses great risk in a small Midwestern town.
Less than an hour, it was completely submerged, the whole neighborhood.
The victims and casualty numbers would have been a whole lot higher if not for the extraordinary courage and selflessness of these first responders.
Then, it's a race against time to save some stranded drivers.
We scream for help and all that stuff, and nobody can hurt anything.
Surrounded by rolling green hills covered in wild grasses, Manhattan, Kansas consistently ranks at the top of the list when it comes to best places to live in the United States. It's no wonder that when a natural disaster struck their community, it was deeply changed. As heavy rain caused creeks and rivers to flood overnight, many that were caught in the danger zone were not aware of how high those floodwaters would rise when they woke up on what they thought would be a regular Monday morning.
Labor Day in the United States is generally memorable for barbecues and even parades. But in 2018, the long holiday weekend in Manhattan, Kansas would soon be remembered for a much different reason. Well before dawn, meteorologists were tracking a line of storms moving into the area, causing rivers and streams to start rising at alarming rates.
I knew that there was a city to the west of us that was suffering some flooding, and I knew that that water was coming our way. So I got up and just went to work.
Firefighters mobilized and began evacuations as quickly as they could before those flash floods would soon take over.
We started going door to door. About 6:30 in the morning is when we started knocking on doors, which there was no flooding at that time. There was no water in yards or street or anything.
The more the general public can listen to and heed the warnings from our first responders, the more damage control we can accomplish. And then obviously, the better off we'll all be.
Over the next few hours, rain pummeled the low-lying neighborhoods, including Wildcat Creek, where the Garden Grove Senior Living Facility is situated.
I was in the shower, and I heard somebody just knock, knock, knock. It seemed like they were knocking on every door in there. So I was like, let me see what's going on, because I could tell that they were going like from door to door knocking.
Gloria Richardson was told to evacuate her ground floor apartment as soon as possible.
So by the time I got out to the sidewalk, the water was coming up. Got ready to put my foot down where my car was to the tire, and it was just like too late. The water came up just that fast. I was just panicky.
The creek had reached its banks, and Manhattan was about to suffer its third flash flood in the past 11 years.
It was completely submerged, the whole neighborhood. And so people that weren't able to get out really weren't even able to walk out. It came that fast.
I was really extremely shocked when I got to the building, and I couldn't even get down the street to my building. It was just cars were submerged, people were stuck. I was one of the first people actually there, and it was just unbelievable to see all the water.
Not being able to swim, my best bet for me was to go back in, go upstairs to my neighbor, Bonnie.
Complicating the rescue efforts, however, was a new threat.
There was reports that morning of first responders were feeling some shocks when they were getting in the water and stuff.
All the electrical lines are underwater, so the way it's designed is it's supposed to trip a breaker once there's a fault somewhere in the system, but that doesn't always happen.
Household wiring is not made for the elements like our equipment is. So when water mixes with household wiring and stuff like that, then there is a possibility of being able to be electrocuted in that instance.
But shutting off the power to a large area may not be as easy as it sounds.
When you're talking about dumping a circuit, you're killing the power to thousands of people, not just the area that's flooded, but to ensure the safety of those first responders down there, we had to kill the circuit to thousands of people.
So they took their chances and dumped the power, hoping for the best.
We actually took a member of the power company out on the boat, and he had to throw a big disconnect switch.
With the power off, the firefighters could now get their boats in and get the residents out to safety without any major injuries. City officials called this flash flood a 500-year event. And thankfully, the quick actions of the first responders made sure everybody was safe.
None of our residents got hurt, so that was, I thought, amazing that people were able to move that quickly and get out of their apartments and get up to safety. They were wonderful that day and just really stayed calm and helped our residents stay calm, and that was all we could ask for.
The people of Manhattan, Kansas will not forget the Labor Day flash flood of 2018, but they will always remember the bravery and compassion of their first responders.
They were concerned about us, and I felt in my heart that they were angels that were sent to us.
For the people of Manhattan, Kansas, the flash flood of Labor Day weekend 2018 was a life-changing event. Thanks in large part to the town's first responders, there were no fatalities. But as the rain slowed down and the floodwaters began to recede, the extent of the damage became heartbreakingly clear, especially at the Garden Grove Senior Facility.
It was a mess. During the highest point in the water, there was water up, to the windows and submerging cars. Residents' items, things from the community room are just floating all around.
Because the floods came on so fast and so strong, people had very little time to save anything.
For a lot of them, it's probably the worst day of their life. Like, a lot of them lost everything.
There is things in there that's gonna hurt me, like pictures of my daughter, because I had it in, like suitcases and stuff like that, and that water came and it got up in the suitcases.
But fortunately, for those that were living at Garden Grove, another team of specialists was ready to deploy.
All we want is for the residents of Garden Grove is to get their lives back to normal as quickly as possible.
As soon as the water receded, the team went to work, removing debris, ripping out waterlogged carpets, and tearing out damaged drywall.
Luckily, we had a team already in place in the Manhattan area, so we were actually here within less than an hour.
That fast response is extremely important because floodwaters are labeled Category 3, or black water, because they are grossly unsanitary. The water can contain sewage, oil from roads, and biohazardous materials.
Anything that comes in contact with floodwater should be disinfected and disposed of.
They were not only devastated by the loss of their home, but for their irreplaceable mementos, like Gloria Richardson's precious family photos.
Her car still had about 4 or 5 inches of water in the trunk. And I could feel the picture frames as I was pulling them out of the car. I told her, I have your pictures. And she's like, what are you gonna do with them? I'm gonna save them. We're gonna save them.
The first step in restoration is a surprising one. The damaged items are immediately put in the freezer for a process called freeze drying.
Whenever it's gotten wet, if you let it dry on its own without a controlled environment, they'll tend to wrinkle or crackle. But if you freeze it right away, it stops any additional damage.
The technicians start the restoration process, carefully separating and cleaning each photo with sponges because they know how valuable these memories are.
In Gloria's case, these memories are important to her, especially since she has a daughter that has passed away.
A few weeks later, after a lot of painstaking work, Sheldon Yellen was delighted to make a special delivery to Gloria in person.
I just want you to know that I heard of your spirit and the perseverance that you have to bounce back and to know that tomorrow's going to be better.
It's just been such a blessing, the way that I was treated through this.
The era rallied the troops to perform some heroic acts. I'd love to ask you to just take your time in opening this box.
To God be the glory. I thank you so much. And I was thinking about these pictures. I cannot thank you all enough for all the stuff that you've done.
This is what we do, preserving memories for special people like you.
Thank you so much. I'll have to give you a hug.
Gloria,
To God be the glory. That's all I
God
can
bless
say.
you. Continue to inspire us all. We're so grateful that you've allowed us the honor of serving you.
With the damage from the Labor Day flash flood being repaired, both in the home and in the heart, the people of Manhattan, Kansas have a lot to be thankful for.
Welcome back. Summer afternoons spent driving country roads, always a great way to relax, especially if it's in the rural hills of North Carolina. Pastoral, quiet, peaceful. However, when floodwaters rise, those same roads can turn deadly.
If you live in the Carolinas, all the natural beauty around you does come with a bit of a trade-off.
I've lived here all my life, and we usually experience a hurricane event normally about once every 3 years. So this is probably my 10th or 12th hurricane event, but this is one of the most severe that we've ever experienced.
It was September 2018 when Hurricane Florence came blowing out of the Atlantic Ocean. At times, it reached Category 4 status with winds of more than 140 miles per hour. But once Florence reached land, it slowed down. And believe it or not, that is what made this particular storm so devastating.
We've had hurricanes in the past where we had over 100 miles an hour, but they came in fast and moved on. This storm really slowed down to a crawl, 2, 3, 4 miles an hour. And that's what really hurt us. It just sat right here and just pounded on us.
Some areas got up to 36 inches of rain that week, like along the Neuse River, just 40 miles inland from the Atlantic Ocean.
We, of course, had strong, powerful, tropical storm force winds in our area. We had heavy rains that inundated our rivers.
It took 6 whole days for Florence to slog across North Carolina, claiming 41 lives and leaving an estimated $17 billion worth of damage. It was an epic event, but thankfully, thousands of trained personnel were on the job.
Prior to the storm, we had been activated, alerted to let us know to be ready. So we prepared our crews. The day prior to the storm, we deployed to Raleigh-Durham Airport, where we would perform missions out of there.
The victims and casualty numbers would have been a whole lot higher if not for the extraordinary courage and selflessness of these first responders. They put themselves in harm's way to save their fellow citizens, and they do it with skill and dedication.
While Florence was creating chaos across the state, crews worked tirelessly around the clock to make hundreds of rescues and evacuations. But once the hurricane finally passed, that didn't mean the danger was gone. In this case, that trouble soon came knocking, thanks to storm surge flooding the rivers.
So a storm surge is wind-driven water that backs up into the rivers, and so instead of the rivers flowing to the sea as they normally flow, actually the ocean flows up into the rivers.
The swollen Neuse River was still creating major problems, and one group of men misjudged the threat level of the conditions around them.
When people drive into water and they realize that it's too deep for them to go any further, sometimes by the time they realize that, it's too late for them to safely get out. At some point, then their car engine will suck up water, will ingest water, and it, of course, will cut off. And so then they're stranded in that water.
Which is exactly what happened to a Virginia man named Abelardo Martinez and his 3 friends. Lost and turned around by confusing GPS directions, they wound up driving right into the disaster.
Just took us like right away, not even like 5 seconds. We ended up like the water was all over my neck.
In a heartbeat, the men were taken on the ride of their lives. The deceptively powerful and deep current swept their 3,000-pound car like a toy, up against a nearby row of trees. Water gushed in, and they scrambled to the roof. Everardo was the only one who could swim, and since the area seemed to be deserted, he made the decision to brave those rushing waters and go for help.
So I started swimming, swimming and swimming and swimming, and I went down like 2 times, I almost died, the second time.
Being in the moving water in through those trees would have been extremely dangerous, because that's when we run into things we call strainers. Water runs through, but a person won't, and it can actually pin a person or drown them.
But Everardo found enough strength, inspired by a vision of his daughter. He pushed himself up and out of that raging current and staggered out to a nearby road.
All I remember is I saw this guy pulling over in a big truck, and I screamed. I said, "Hey, look, we need some help. Can you call 911?"
Nearly a week after Hurricane Florence ravaged North Carolina, its lethal after effects were trying to claim even more victims. Flood survivor Everardo Martinez had swam to safety, but his 3 friends were still trapped on top of their submerged car. First responders rushed to the scene.
Crossed over the river bridge, and then we could see the victims as we approached, and their vehicle had been swept completely off the road up against a line of trees, and their vehicle was completely submerged. They were actually standing on the roof of their vehicle.
Due to the swiftness of the currents in the river there, we opted to get them life preservers, get them secured safely. We didn't feel comfortable with pulling them to the vehicle, so we had a helicopter already en route.
One of the most impressive things about emergency responses in America is how quickly and effectively all these various agencies communicate with each other to do the best job possible.
We prepare for natural disasters through training. Here at our facility, we train 1 week out of the month for heart training. We dedicate 25% of our time to rescue.
After getting the call, the elite team quickly loaded into their Black Hawk helicopter and raced to the scene. With lives in the balance, they prepared for the unexpected.
Every situation is dynamic, so for the most part, we knew we'd train for this scenario, but you never can tell. We don't know if there's power lines above this car that's going to prevent us from doing this.
You could just faintly tell that they were standing on top of a vehicle because all you could see was a red square that they were on top of.
But that was the best course of action, and the team quickly determined the right equipment for the job. Chris Hendricks and another rescue tech were lowered down by Sergeant Rowe onto that crowded roof, where another safety concern was looming.
We don't know if the car is stable as to when we come in and we produce all this wind, we're going to start moving the car and so the car and the survivors and potentially us are moving down the river in moving water.
Fortunately, the car was wedged tightly against those trees, and the first rescue went according to plan.
When we pick up the first guy, as he's coming up, we like to back off scene so that our rotor wash from our aircraft doesn't cause any interference with the other guys on the ground. If we stay overhead, we're potentially putting hurricane force winds down on people, and we could potentially blow them off of the car roof or whatever they're holding on to at the time.
From dry land, as Everardo watched his friends being lifted to safety, he too felt a giant weight being lifted.
I just felt this relief, because it was so stressful, seeing them over there.
For the helicopter aerial rescue team, all that hard work and training was paying off with a perfect mission.
I come back down, got the second one, brought him up, and then we still left one more rescuer on the car. We sent the hook down to him. He already had the third survivor packaged up, brought him up, and it went flawless.
The rescued men were cold and shaken up, but realized they owed their lives to the valiant first responders.
I told him, I said, thank you so much for what you guys did to us, with us. Took us out of there, safe, and all that, which is good.
In the end, like all first responders, they put themselves at risk to make you safer.
It's always nice to know that you played a small role as part of a big team in helping people in a crisis.
These heroic people put themselves on the line for others, for people they've never met, and they risk their lives.
I get paid to save lives. I get paid to fly on a helicopter and swing from a hook. It is a cool job, but then again, it is a profession. Would I do it for free? Probably.
Listen, it's never the wrong time to ask for help when caught in a natural disaster. And as we've seen here, the survivors of these wild floods were extremely lucky to be saved. First responders might chalk it up to just doing their job, but for the rest of us, the work they do is more than that. It's life-saving, and we are so thankful for their service. And Thank you for watching.